Something was hidden in the rocks and only a child could see it. The little girl froze, pointing to an amber bottle wedged deep in a granite crack where the trail squeezed tight. "Daddy, it's stuck," she whispered, her voice trembling with the thrill of finding something no one else should. Her father knelt, brushing away the dust, feeling the cold, smooth surface. Faded black letters traced across the plastic like a secret message. "If found, take to Ranger Station." The cap was wound in old electrical tape, brittle and flaked with age. A nylon lanyard hung limp, snapped clean as if something had pulled too hard from the other side. He worked it loose, careful not to break what time had already spared. Around them, the mountain sighed. Late summer in the Smokies, sunlight dripping through tulip poplars, thunder whispering far off down the valley. Inside the bottle lay two things. A page from a notepad, stained the color of weak tea, and a disposable camera, 24 exposures, the kind you'd find on a drugstore carousel decades ago. The cardboard peeling but still whole. The paper's top corner was torn away, clean as if by a steady hand. Stamped at the bottom was a ranger badge. The handwriting above it was quick and uneven, the kind made by someone who knows he's running out of time. Blue tarp at Cold Spring. Not alone. Copper smell. Then a name. Slanted, shaky, desperate. Mercer. That afternoon they carried the bottle to the ranger station. The desk sergeant, a gray-bearded man in a faded canvas shirt, looked at the name and froze. His eyes fell heavy. "Eli Mercer," he said quietly, as though the mountain itself had spoken. He turned the bottle slowly, almost tenderly. "He hasn't come home since 1996. On the wall behind him hung a photo you wouldn't notice unless you were looking. Grainy Kodak paper pinned to cork. A tall ranger in a green uniform beside a white and green Ford Bronco. A kind face, smiling without meaning to. Behind him, Pine Ridge blurred into mist. The caption read, "Park Ranger Eli Mercer, missing 6/15/96. The sergeant took the bottle and the camera as if they were sacred. A strange laugh escaped him, part relief, part disbelief. "I thought the mountain ate him," he said softly. "Maybe this is his way back." Back then, the last anyone heard from Eli came through a broken radio call. "Charlie 2, I'm at the Cold Spring Spur, blue tarp, stand by." Then silence. The storm that came next stole the rest. In 1996, you checked in every hour. You kept your paper log dry. You folded your map like your life depended on it because it did. No GPS, no satellite pings, just contour lines and instinct. The radio batteries died fast if fear pressed too long on the button. And your boots, they were your only promise of getting home. The father and his daughter stepped outside the station and watched clouds tighten over the North Ridge. He thought about the words on that note. Not alone. Copper smell, metal, blood, and storm. He pictured Mercer crouched beneath the same granite lip 20 years earlier, rain flattening the leaves, trying to write something that might save him. The sergeant, his badge read AR Keen, picked up the phone and dialed a number taped inside his drawer. One reserved for ghosts that never stopped walking. "We've got movement on Mercer," he said. "Bottle, camera, and a note." His eyes flicked back to the old photo, like he was asking permission to open a door that should have stayed shut. Outside, thunder stitched itself across the sky. The first fat drops hit the roof. The little girl asked if the ranger was coming home now. Her father wanted to say yes. Instead, he said, "Sometimes finding a voice is close enough," and watched Keen lock the bottle in an evidence cabinet thick with dust. The key turned, a small sound, but it felt like time itself had started again. Rain deepened. The wood rail darkened with heavy coins of water. Somewhere in that green maze of ridges, the mountain kept its secrets, patient and quiet. If a single bottle could survive 2 decades hidden among roots and stone, what else might still be out there waiting to be found? Back in 1996, Eli Mercer lived out of 3 things: a pocket notebook, a dented metal lunchbox with an elk decal, and the glove compartment of his white and green Bronco that rattled like a box of tools on gravel roads. His handwriting was neat and measured like a surveyor. At the top of the page for June 15th, he wrote, "Soros 600, Patrol North District, Balsam Ridge." Rain forecast, thunder 3 p.m. He circled the word rain twice. Below that, hiker report. A woman named Lani had called from a diner payphone, the kind that smelled like grease and coffee. She said she'd seen a sky blue tent and a man in a bandana camping below Cold Spring, just off the Spur trail. When she waved, he waved back. Not friendly, more like warning off a dog. Rude, she'd said. But something about the motion had unsettled her. Eli wrote 2 words in the margin. Possible poachers. Summer always brought the diggers, men who traded daylight for secrets and cash. His sister, Rye, kept his last voicemail because she liked how bright he'd sounded. Hey Rye, it's me. I'll swing by Sunday if I'm not dead on my feet. Tell Noah I've got that baseball glove in the truck. Smells like a dead cow, but it's lucky. She'd replayed it again and again after he vanished, pressing her ear to the speaker until the tape hissed and faded right at dead cow. That's how grief works. Small words grow teeth. When the storm rolled in that afternoon, it didn't ask permission. The ridgelines disappeared, poplars whipped in the wind, and rain struck the ground like gravel. Eli's final radio call came from Cold Spring Spur, and then the mountain swallowed the rest. Search teams fanned out with paper maps sealed in plastic sleeves, mag lights heavy enough to double as hammers. They found Eli's Bronco parked at the trailhead. On the passenger seat, a neatly folded raincoat. In his lunchbox, nothing but an Apple sticker and a grocery receipt. Points Market, Maxwell Coffee, Jerky, Dell's. And the mountain, as always, said nothing. The last page of Eli's notebook was gone, torn clean along the serrated edge. It was the kind of tear that means someone wanted that page to go somewhere else. 3 days later, they found the blue tarp Lan had described, flapping weakly in the wind like something half alive. The camp sat beneath a sweep of rhododendron, glowing faintly green in the storm's leftover light. There were signs of a hurried life, a coil of orange twine, a crushed cooler with half a dozen beer cans, a frying pan slick with dried grease, no tent, no bandana, no footprints that meant anything. Rain had turned it all into smears and shadows. But along the edge of a trout stream, something stranger waited. 3 young saplings had been notched at eye level. Each bore a square of bark, cut clean and glistening like fresh skin. 2 were smeared with mud. The third was darker, almost black when wet. When it dried, it turned the color of old pennies. One of the older wardens brushed his fingers against it, brought them to his nose, and turned away. He didn't speak. He took a small spiral pad from the cooler and flipped it open. Grocery lists, beer, jerky, coffee. Then on the last line of the report, he wrote 1 word: blood. By the week's end, the search maps looked like a storm drawn by a child. Red pencil circles bled into contour lines that twisted tight across the page. Men smoked under lean-tos, rain dripping from their hats. They wrung their socks over coffee cups and waited for orders. Volunteers walked blowdowns with aluminum poles, calling Eli's name into the rain until it sounded more like something hunted than someone missed. Ray Mercer stood silent in the ranger station lobby, staring at the old corkboard photo of Eli and his Bronco. The tape on the answering machine jammed with too many messages. The rain kept coming, endless. The investigation, as much as the mountain allowed one, narrowed into 3 envelopes. Accident, a fall, a flood, an animal, a boar, maybe a black bear, human, a fight, poachers, something uglier. The envelope marked human had 2 names inside. The Jensenang brothers, poachers from across the line. They'd once left a broken Cessna wing in their front yard for fun. Questioned, released. Nothing stuck. Then came the rumors. Meth labs in old root cellars. Gallbladders traded in parking lots. Abandoned mine shafts deep enough to hide thunder. The file grew thick with noise but hollow with answers. After the final search logs in July, the only papers added were lunch receipts and fuel reports. No note, no camera, no bottle. Just blank pages and silence. In 2014, Keene stared at the amber bottle, wondering what made a man tear a notebook's last page and seal it with a disposable camera. Not vanity, not even hope. Something smaller. A faith that paper could outlive weather if you asked it kindly. He set the bottle on the evidence table and pulled a blank chain of custody form. The pen clicked too hard, the tip scratching the paper. He wrote Eli Mercer slowly, each letter heavy, as though saying the name might draw a sound from the hills. Then he picked up the phone and called the state lab, the one that still knew how to wake old film from its sleep. The disposable camera was sun-faded green and yellow, the kind people bought for vacations. The shutter lever stiff, the lens small but patient. It had stared through storms and trees for decades. The lab tech, a woman with steady hands and eyes that had seen more Polaroids than screens, studied it under a lamp. She smiled faintly. If the seals held, we might still get ghosts. She slipped on cotton gloves and opened the back in the darkroom. Keen waited in the hallway, pacing like the years themselves were building up behind the door. He could almost hear the faint click of the lever, frame after frame, as Eli had pressed his thumb against time. In 1996, these cameras were simple but loyal. They didn't think, they remembered. People mailed them in and waited 3 days to find out if they'd captured something worth keeping. Sometimes they got a sticker instead. Oops, your thumb got in the way. Keen thought about Eli that last day, wet and exhausted, forcing the lever forward, the film winding with its small mechanical sigh. Every frame, one more proof he was still there. When the call came, Keen stepped into the dark room. 6 photographs lay drying on the light table, not a full roll. The storm had likely drowned the rest. The first frame was wide and distant, Cold Spring from above, treetops stitched together like a quilt. The sky bruised purple on the horizon. The second shot zoomed lower, showing the corner of a blue tarp, dulled by dust and tethered with orange twine. A cooler sat half open nearby. No people, just the echo of someone leaving in a hurry. The third frame made Keen lean closer. A notched sapling filled the shot, bark stripped square. Across the pale wood were 4 streaks. 2 looked like mud. The other 2 caught light differently, slick, darker, unwilling to fade. In the bottom corner, faint and human, a curve of green sleeve, Ranger uniform fabric. The 4th photo showed the ground beneath the tarp. A boot print, half swallowed by rain. The heel had a missing chip, a small triangle gone. Keen remembered that pattern. The Jensenang brothers. He'd logged it himself years ago in a citation book. The 5th frame turned upward, the tops of trees. In the branches, black bundles wrapped tight in trash bags, tied off with twine. They looked like hanging fruit, heavy and wrong. The 6th photo was the one that refused to make sense. A close shot of a cable winch. The yellow paint was chipped and worn. It was half buried in brush, bolted to a chestnut stump. The steel cable stretched away toward the creek, disappearing beneath a log weighted with rocks. On the stump, freshly carved, was a half-moon notch. The exposed wood glowed pale, almost bone white. The lab tech read the note again aloud. Copper smell. She looked up. Blood has copper in it, she said, but so does a dying battery. She nudged the final photo with a pencil eraser. Whatever this was, it burned. Keen gathered the 6 prints in the note and carried them to the superintendent, a man who had once been the rookie on Eli S.'s last call. They cleared the big map table, spread the prints out like playing cards, and stared. Bundles and trees, a winch, fresh wood. The superintendent tapped the photos with a thick finger. Those bundles look like stash, he said. Ginseng, beer, or something worse. The winch means weight, and weight means one of 2 things. You're either pulling something out of the ground or you re-putting something into it. He paused, eyeing the clean new cut of wood in that last photo. Raw, pale, alive. That notch wasn't old, he said quietly. Someone carved it after the storm. They returned to Cold Spring, father and daughter together. She wore a small ranger hat that Keen had discovered in the old supply closet. With remarkable dedication, she adopted the part, determined to play her role right. The wildness of the forest had once again grown over everything, covering the signs of what had happened there. But as always, the bones of old stories lingered for those who knew how to read the land. The old cooler had been carried away by animals years before. Any remains of the tarp were almost certainly gone, shredded and built into mouse nests somewhere in the undergrowth. But after 3 obsessive hours, working from Eli's camera-shot triangulations, they rediscovered what they were seeking: the stump. The winch itself was missing, erased by time or scavengers, but its groove remained, worn now, softened by seasons, but unmistakable for those who had seen it before. 6 feet away, embedded in the stone as if in hibernation, lay a flash of weathered steel. Keene dug at the spot, first with a stick and then with his hands, and finally pulled free a revolver. The finish was pockmarked, bluing lost in places, its rubber grip melted and deformed by some caustic encounter. Yet the SNW stamp was clear. The hammer rested on an empty cylinder. Perhaps it had been fired last and gently lowered. Further upslope, the ground sagged faintly as though something hidden lay beneath, a secret the earth hadn't yet entirely forgotten. Using aluminum rods, the party probed until one sank into empty space with a dull, ominous knock. Beneath layers of duff and bramble, they uncovered an uneven rectangle of plywood and stacked stones. Keene swept the debris aside, releasing a sharp, sour scent, like a battery in a puddle of pennies. He glanced at the girl, noting she had gone silent, but her gaze was level and fiercely steady, a look he instantly respected. He felt a sting of protectiveness, wanting to send her with her father back to the station, perhaps for Coco. But she would not leave. She seemed like someone who could and would keep a secret. He raised the plywood as if it were a theater's curtain, and there, rusting among the roots, was the rim of a steel drum. One of those 55-gallon barrels you might see in a half-collapsed barn or lined up behind some derelict shop, its lid drawn tight by a thick ring. It listed in its pit, stubborn, refusing to settle. 6 rocks had been forced in around it, no doubt to prevent the barrel from rising in wet weather or in a flood. Keene crouched low, feeling a chill creep into his bones, a complicated scent, chemicals riding beneath the metallic tang. "Step back," he murmured gently, not out of fear for their safety, but because the drum represented something altogether out of place, a letter dropped into the wrong century. They documented everything with the 35mm camera from the evidence kit, a weighty relic compared to the quick snap of a disposable, each shutter click closing with the conviction of a heavy door. They measured, sketched the scene, tagged the stump with the winch's scar, and wrapped the revolver gingerly in wax paper, treating it as both relic and clue. The recovery crew arrived, solemn as the darkening clouds overhead. Together, using webbing for leverage, they managed to coax the barrel from its place and pop loose the lid's ring. What they found inside was not what anyone had first suspected. Rather than earth, bones, or refuse, they found a mass of concrete, settled like an old cake, its crown troweled smooth. Air bubbles pockmarked the surface, remnants of a hurried, hot pour. Pressed into the crown, not quite centered, was a scrap of green cloth, flattened, its presence punctuated by 3 small holes forming an ellipsis. Keene did not speak the words that trembled in his mind. He didn't say shirt or uniform or badge. Instead, he stepped aside and allowed the forensic team to push closer, pry bars ready. They rolled the heavy drum, finally managing to fracture the concrete shell like a dry egg. What spilled out was not clean evidence. A skull, teeth, easy proofs, but a haphazard tangle of objects rooted in utility and secrecy. Burlap sacks fused stiff with cement, a length of copper wire scorched black where electricity had run wild, the lower jawbone of a boar tusks crudely sawn, 2 deer hooves truncated at the joint, pressed like artifacts in a natural museum. A younger ranger's voice was shaky as he said, "Poachers," relief and disappointment in equal measure. But why a barrel coffin? The forensics lab would eventually offer their judgment. The copper wire bore scars of a makeshift electrical trap, a jury-rigged loop meant to electrify a creek and snatch stunned trout. Illegal, sneaky, and catastrophic. At some point, rain had found its way into a split splice, and the wire's end met the damp cement, searing it with the metallic taste Eli once described. So the drum, it appeared, had been a stash, a way to anchor whatever its owner wished to keep hidden and weighted down. Perhaps, once, roots from the ginseng plant had been left to dry on the burlap. Maybe trophies, maybe future meat, suspended in the cold current of a creek to avoid rot and claim privacy. Yet embedded in the concrete as if left on purpose, they discovered a card, a photograph printed on coated stock, long since transformed by time and minerals into a murky ceramic. Gently working it free and rinsing it in the creek, the image revealed itself. Eli Mercer at a summer barbecue in uniform, a blue softball jersey just visible, holding someone else's baby, as sunlight danced on the photo, as faded face. A duplicate of the photo still pinned at the ranger station. "How does Eli's picture end up in there?" a young ranger whispered, unable to hide his surprise. Keene examined the pit, the empty drum's bleak interior, and listened to the shuffle of evolving theories. Accident was possible. Deliberate action just as likely. The empty gun had been fired at some point. The winch pointed to something too heavy or dangerous to lift alone. Possibly a body at one time, possibly not. Whatever had been bundled in the fifth photo from Eli's old roll was gone without a trace. They expanded the search beyond the winch's old anchoring line, investigating further for shafts, old mining digs, anything that might explain a scar in the landscape. 2 drainages away, following a dip in the land where the air cooled suddenly, they found it. A thin seam of darkness in the bank, ringed with timber, dark as tea, a lone rusted rail like a black tongue reaching into the earth. It was no cavern, just a compressed crawl space, the kind you could only walk in if you lowered your head in deference. Inside, the air was thick with mouse scent and wild thyme. Flashlights sent dust glittering in a constellation above. 50 feet in, the ceiling dropped, and to the right, the tunnel ended, not in stone, but in a carefully constructed timber wall. Nails had been hammered in, then bent flat, as if to fasten the secret shut. Keene pressed his ear to the wall and heard nothing but the rhythm of the forest breathing around him. They carefully lifted the boards, moving with the slow, deliberate rhythm of people opening a door to something long hidden. Behind them, a small, enclosed space waited, a place where someone could sit and watch the weather pass, safe in shadow. Inside, a milk crate rested on the floor. An old Coleman lantern sat to one side, and in the corner, a circle of waxed rock caught the light. 3 pennies had been pressed into the wax, neatly arranged, like someone had left a signature. Beneath the milk crate lay a spiral notebook, neat and worn, the pages still holding words written long ago. The last entry was methodical. Camera, bottle, note, revolver, mark stump, winch, follow. Under that, a warning. If I'm late, Cold Spring, don't let Rye come here. The top page had been torn cleanly away. Keene paused, eyes closing for a heartbeat. Lantern, pennies, notebook. This was the careful planning of someone who had trusted the world to keep his secrets safe. Outside, the little girl traced the rusted rail at the entrance, finger moving along it as if following a story finally reaching its next chapter. They brought Ray Mercer to the site, on a morning when the mountains seemed kind. Light filtered through the trees, minting every leaf, and the creek sang with innocence, its voice soft and playful. She wore her brother's old flannel, cuffs rolled back, and a ball cap that from certain angles made her look like him. Keene tilted his head, letting the ache settle. They didn't mention the drum at first, letting her take in the false wall, the waxed pennies, and the careful order of things left behind. She studied it for a long moment, eyes bright with quiet understanding. He always had to tidy up after chaos, she said finally. That was his blessing and his anchor. They documented the site thoroughly. The revolver, carefully recovered, had 2 spent rounds, and time had softened its metal and edges. The serial matched Eli's issued gun, though the evidence was fragmentary. No one could claim it in court, but that was not what mattered here. The story itself was enough to know the man had been here, had left his markers for anyone paying attention. Later, the park held a quiet ceremony at the overlook, where 4 ridges layered like folded quilts, the edges burning pale blue in late light. Keene read aloud from Eli's notebook. If I'm late, Cold Spring. It carried the weight of someone holding his own ghost's hand. The father and the little girl stood beside them, figures added to a photograph without breaking it. The girl wore the small ranger hat again, clutching a tulip poplar leaf like a shield, large and green as a promise. Rye uncapped a bottle, the same brand Eli had used. She poured a finger of creek water over the edge, letting it fall into the shadow below. The wind lifted it in fine silver arcs, writing a brief paragraph into the air, a quiet conversation with time itself. At the ranger station, they added a new photo to the corkboard beside Eli's. It was a candid from the recovered roll, the first frame that truly captured the essence of the ridge. Trees crowded together like a quilt, and the sky carried bruised light, a truth held too long. It wasn't an answer, but it was a view through Eli's eyes, and that was enough. Rye kept Eli's recovered notebook at her bedside. On certain nights when the rain tapped the windows in just the right rhythm, she opened to the last page, pressing her palm over the indent where his pen had pressed hard. She spoke softly to it sometimes, whispering back to the message left for her as though the act could bridge years. "You still owe Noah that glove," she said once, smiling at the memory. The father and daughter returned to the granite chute before school resumed. The crack where the amber bottle had rested seemed ordinary now, another seam in the mountain's quiet face. The girl asked if the ranger had ever come home. The father, who had learned that homes sometimes live in other people's stories, said he had. They ate sandwiches on a dry boulder, and when the wind shifted, the tulip poplars clapped softly, a private applause for patience and persistence. The case file never closed the way paper wants it to, but in the mountains where stories nest and carry weight across generations, something did. An understanding that a man in 1996, armed with a disposable camera and a bottle, had trusted the future not to forget him. The mountains are full of such small acts, knots on trees, pennies pressed into wax, messages written in the rain. They are not promises, but invitations. Keene retired the following spring. On his last day, he took the key to the evidence cabinet, opening it to stand in the hollow and listen to the quiet hum of the things that had outlasted him. He held Eli's bottle one final time. It felt heavier than it looked, as all objects weighted with truth do. He replaced it, turned the key, and let the quiet settle around him. Outside, thunder stitched along distant ridges like a slow zipper. Keene stepped into the rain, feeling the rhythm of the mountain around him, walking into a story he now understood how to carry. If the mountain finally spoke, it did so in a voice made of patience, paper, and care, saying only this: "I kept what you asked."